In stories, power can take many forms. Some are subtle, some are godlike. But which kind makes for the best stories? Is it better when a character ends a fight in one punch, or 100? Ask most modern anime fans, and you'll hear a common answer. Flawed powers make stories better. Why? Because flaws create tension. They force creativity. They drive growth. But what if that's missing the real point? What if flawed powers aren't deep? They're just misunderstood. In this video, we'll explain why flawed powers aren't what make a story well written, and what does. Pint Here's video on flawed abilities partly inspired this video, but here we're zooming out. We're asking a broader question. Do flawed powers improve a story? To begin with, what are flaws? A flaw can be defined as an imperfection or weakness, and especially one that detracts from the whole or hinders effectiveness, or a mark, fault, or other imperfection that mars a substance or object. With this definition, we come to a strange conclusion. Every power is flawed. If a power is not omnipotent, it has limits. It can be countered or misused, and cannot solve all problems. And that's where the phrase, flawed power, starts to fall apart. If every ability is flawed by default, then asking, is this power flawed, doesn't tell us anything useful. You can run fast, but you can't fly. You can fly, but you can still take fall damage. These are flaws. What's really happening is this. Some stories emphasize a specific flaw within a power because that flaw reflects something important. Maybe a theme, a conflict, or something about a character. The power itself isn't inherently more interesting. It just feels that way because of how it's framed. Take Gurren Lagann, for example. In this world, piloting a mech isn't just about technical skill. It requires believing in yourself and synchronization with a co-pilot. At first, this seems like a limitation, but it's not about the power, it's about the characters. For Simon, who struggles with confidence, this flaw reflects his arc. His ability to pilot isn't just a mechanical hurdle, it's a mirror of his emotional state. When he can't sync, we know he's battling doubt. When he can, we know he's ready. The mech doesn't limit him, he limits himself. At that point, the tension doesn't come from the ability of being flawed, but from how the character's internal conflict shapes their relationship to that power. And by the time the cast is flinging galaxies and drilling through universes, it's not about power levels, it's about how far they've come, and if they can really succeed despite the odds. The same applies to Deku from My Hero Academia. One for All wasn't flawed. Deku was. His body couldn't handle the power, not because the power was flawed, but because he lacked control, and his body wasn't ready. The limitation wasn't in the quirk, it was in the user. As Deku grows, he gains control over One for All, but this doesn't make the power less interesting. The creativity, tension, or growth doesn't vanish, it evolves. In Naruto, the Rasen Shuriken evolves from a flawed move to a perfected one. Even while being less flawed, tension and tactics still exist. This shows that it's not the flaws that create dramatic storytelling, but rather the conflict in context. When Naruto learns Rasen Shuriken, it comes with big drawbacks. Despite the name, it only functions as a melee attack, so landing it requires incredible speed or distraction. It also burns out quickly, leaving little room for hesitation. And worst of all, it damages the user on impact, a flaw Naruto only discovers after defeating Kakuzu. These limitations shape Kakuzu's fight. Kakuzu specializes in mid to long-range combat, forcing Naruto to close the distance, a challenge born from both the opponent's strengths and the technique's weakness. Later in the fight against Pain, Naruto overcomes these issues. He can now throw the Rasen Shuriken from a distance, minimizing risk and removing the self-damage. With a solid plan in place, he avoids the burnout that once limited him. In theory, this should remove the fight's tension and creativity, but it doesn't. Pain is still able to dodge the attack, though at a cost. Even when Naruto finds an opening, he must deal with Pain's ability to absorb chakra. Rasen Shuriken's flaws are no longer internal, they're external. So what does this tell us? What matters is how powers are challenged, contextualized, and countered within the story. It's not the power itself, but the way it's used that creates meaning. Good fight scenes aren't about the abilities, but the choices, strategies, or stakes. Sometimes a story includes powers with inherent limitations that never go away. Take Death Note. To kill someone, the user must know the victim's full name. That rule becomes an obstacle, but it doesn't have to be that way. You could just as easily write a version where the user only needs to draw a doodle and think of the person. That rule is less restrictive, but still introduces limitation. Or go even further. Imagine a Death Note that kills as long as you're holding the book and thinking of someone. Now say the main character's a pacifist. He refuses to use the book and doesn't even know what it truly does. Meanwhile, his younger brother, who can't use the book but knows its power, tries to manipulate him into holding it. In this version, the conflict isn't about the mechanics of the power. It's about the divide between two characters. One believes in restraint, the other not so much, and that's the key. A story's power system doesn't need to be heavily restrictive. It just needs to generate conflict based around characters. This brings us to a common misconception often used when critiquing or analyzing power systems. Brandon Sanderson's laws of magic. Sanderson uses 3 laws to guide himself in crafting magic systems. These laws are: 1. An author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands that magic. 2. Limitations are greater than powers. 3. Expand what you already have before introducing something new. These laws are useful, especially for writers new to creating magic systems or unsure how theirs should work, but they're not universal. You can write an effective magic system while breaking these laws. Even Sanderson acknowledges this. He designed these rules to guide his writing, not to serve as absolute principles for everyone else. The second law is the most relevant to this video: limitations over powers. According to Sanderson, flaws are more interesting than powers themselves. He came to this conclusion after making a character with telekinesis, only to realize he'd unintentionally made Magneto, but with extra steps. Even though he made a power similar to one that already exists, he found it interesting. So he thought what made the power interesting wasn't the ability. The limitations forced him to write more strategically. He's right in principle. Limits can inspire creativity. A flying ability with short flight or recoil damage adds tactics. Readers anticipate those problems, and tension builds. But here's the twist. This is true, but not because the power is flawed. It's because the story knows how to use the limitation well. And again, every power has limits. What matters is how these limits affect the characters, not just the mechanics. Imagine a character who can fly with no fall damage, no stamina issues, and full control, but they're terrified of heights. The limitation isn't in the power, but in the character. The tension now comes from the character, not the system. That can still be just as dramatic, just as meaningful. The real issue is that some writers and fans have fallen in love with one kind of conflict: mechanical flaws. They treat them as the best way to write powers, but that's a narrow view. A character like Saitama works not because his powers are flawed, but because his strength leaves him bored, isolated, and craving purpose. And sometimes, the obsession with flawed powers leads to poor writing. Look at CW's The Flash. His flaw is supposed to be that his speed can't always save the day, but those limits only show up when the plot needs him to struggle. One episode, he's dodging bullets. The next, he's losing to guys with guns. That's not interesting. That's inconsistency. But now, take King from One Punch Man. He has no powers, or at least seems to, but the world believes he's powerful, and how he reacts to that misunderstanding creates suspense and comedy. His limitation isn't mechanical. What makes him work is the anticipation. We know something ridiculous will happen, and we can't wait to see how the story pulls it off. In this case, the power's greater than the limitation. The contrast between expectation and reality is what makes the drama. Conflict can come from a goal or fear, not just rules. A flawed power is one way to create conflict. In the end, stories aren't about your favorite tropes. They're about how that trope serves the character, theme, or journey. So is it better to end a fight in one punch or 100? That depends, because in the end, a punch only matters when it matters to someone in the story. That's where the real power lies.